Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. My name is Harshmeet Singh and I welcome you all to this week's explained session. As you can see on the screen today, we will be discussing about 5G. Whether the 5G technology is really India's future, or are there some loopholes in this technology that we are not able to see right now. Each and everything about 5G that you need to know for your civil service examination point of view will be discussed in today's session. I thank you all once again for joining in, and let's begin the session with a very simple discussion on what exactly we will be going through. In today's class, we will be starting with what exactly is 5G. How is it different from 4G or 3G? What are some key points that make the 5G technology apart as compared to 4G and 3G? The second thing that we will be discussing is, do we really need 5G? You know, we already have 4G, we already have 3G phones. Is it not enough? We will also be discussing about whether or not 5G can be a game changer. What are some of the new technological advancements that are solely dependent on 5G working in the country? We will also be focusing on the challenges that India specifically is facing with respect to the 5G rollout. And in the end, we will be discussing about all the controversies that are surrounding the 5G right now. As you know, there are a lot of people raising questions about the environmental implications of the 5G technology. Hundreds and thousands of flights are being cancelled in the United States. Even Indian airlines flying to the US are cancelling their flights. You might also have heard about people burning cellular towers in the UK, fearing that 5G radiations may cause something bad in the society. All those things will be discussed in today's lecture. In very simple terms, 5G technology stands for the 5th generation of cellular technology. If you ask anyone what is one major point of difference between 5G and other previous technologies that have come in, even a layman can tell you it is actually the speed with which you can go online. 5G offers by far the fastest connectivity that you can have. If you say 4G had the highest speed of 1 Gbps, 5G would have the highest speed of 100 Gbps, that is 100 gigabits per second. Those sorts of speeds are unheard of. Now you might also argue, do you really need 100 Gbps of speed? I mean, in reality, let's accept the fact that you or me, we have never even seen 1 Gbps speed at our homes or in our mobile phone. But our life is going absolutely fine. Then why exactly do we need so much internet speed? Why do we need to go beyond 1 Gbps mark? We will discuss all of that. We will also be discussing about what exactly differentiates 5G and 4G. Now over here, if I have to give you one first technical word which differentiates 4G and 5G, is the lack of latency. Now what exactly is latency? In very simple terms, when I'm speaking to you and when you're hearing my voice, there may be a gap of, let's say, a millisecond, half a second, or 1 second. You might be hearing my voice 1 second after I'm speaking to you. That, in very simple terms, is latency. Any information, any signal that you transmit has certain amount of latency in it. But when you're talking about the state-of-the-art technology, such as driverless cars, you can't afford to have even a minute latency. I'm sure all of you would have heard about the driverless cars that are made by Tesla and other organizations. That car that roams around the street without any driver. When the car sees a danger, it must stop immediately. That signal needs to be transmitted to the brain of the car immediately without even a latency of 1 or 2 seconds. Because a latency of 1 second or half a second can be the difference between the accident and not an accident. That is where a 5G technology would play such a vital role. It minimizes latency that is required in state-of-the-art applications, be it the driverless cars, be it the Internet of Things and other life-saving technologies such as robotic surgeries and etc. We will be discussing most of them as we go on in the class. When you introduced 3G in the world, it gave us speeds that we had never heard about. I still remember I was in college when we heard the news that 3G technology is coming in. Before 3G, when we used to have 2G in our mobile phones, we used to open up a video on YouTube, pause it, go and have our meal, go and have a walk and come back to see whether the video has buffered or not. 3G gave us an experience where we did not have to wait for the videos to buffer. Now we had 4G, where by a click and waiting for 10 to 15 seconds, you can download an entire movie. And now we are entering into the role of 5G. 5G will be an era where within a second or two, you will be able to download heavy files, humongous files that are needed in data sciences. All these things will be much more simpler when we have 5G technology at our disposal. Now the first question that you would have is, what makes 5G technology faster? If we had this technology earlier, why did we not use it earlier? Why are we going gradually, 2G, 3G, 4G and now 5G? The fact that makes 5G different is that 5G technology works on those frequencies where there is minimal interference by any other signal. The lower the interference by any other signal, by any other frequency, the higher would be the efficiency of the signal and higher would be the speed. As simple as that. How does 5G achieve it? 5G achieves it by using a technology called the OFDM, which stands for Orthogonal Frequency Division Multiplexing. Now, before you start wondering what is this and whether or not you would understand it, let me tell you, you don't have to go into details of how this technology works. But you must know that it is based on the OFDM technology. It is a method using which we modulate the digital signals transmitted in such a way that it becomes extremely difficult for any other frequency to come and interfere with the 5G signal. That makes sure that the 5G technology is much faster, it is much more efficient, and also because it cannot be, or because the chances of any interference are lower, it is also much more secure as compared to the earlier versions, that is the 3G, 4G, etc. Now, 5G technology uses much higher frequencies as compared to the 4G technology, and we will discuss that. For example, the 4G technology usually worked at 700 megahertz frequency or even lower than that. In fact, 700 megahertz frequency was said to be the highest mark at which the 4G technology will work. 5G technology, on the other hand, will work in gigahertz. It will use much higher frequency. So it will start, even the lower band of 5G technology will be near about 1 gigahertz. We will also be using the waves. Waves are called the millimeter waves. Millimeter waves, in fact, have an extremely important role in 5G. Millimeter waves means those waves whose wavelength are in millimeters. As you would have known, if you're a science student, there is a very simple relationship between frequency and wavelength. Millimeter waves means those waves which have wavelengths in millimeters. If you convert them into frequencies, these are mainly said to be those waves which are at a frequency of 24 gigahertz or higher. So the 5G technology will be using such high frequency. That is why it is able to transfer data at much higher speeds as compared to the 4G technology, because the 4G technology works at a much lower band. And as a result of which, what will happen? As I said, the biggest outcome of 5G will be low latency, because low latency can be the difference between life and death in extremely important circumstances. Now, while in India, we are still talking about the rollout of the 5G. In fact, the finance minister said in this year's budget that we are about to roll the 5G in 2022. There are many countries across the world that have already rolled out 5G. US, for example, has rolled out 5G in many of its cities. South Korea, which has always been known to have one of the most robust internet connectivity, be it 3G or 4G, has also rolled out the 5G technology. Same with France, same with Australia, etc. So India by no means is one of the first countries to do this. Now there have been many studies conducted across the world to identify whether or not there is a big difference between 4G and 5G. Because we have to understand introducing 5G would require changing all the equipments, would require new mobile phones in your hand if you really want to use 5G. It would require fiber connectivity to a lot of towers, and all that means that there will be an investment of billions and billions of dollars. So before that investment is made, it is actually pertinent to understand whether or not there is a difference between 4G and 5G. So multiple studies have been conducted across the world. One of the studies that you see on the screen shows the comparison between average 4G speeds and average 5G speeds. Now, countries such as South Korea, Australia have seen a major jump with the introduction of 5G. You would say that the same is not really true when you compare it with Brazil, US, Japan, or France. What about India? In India, we are still at the stages of conducting trial for the 5G technology. For example, Jio is conducting trial. They are conducting it in Mumbai. Airtel also has been conducting trials at multiple places, especially the metro cities. Airtel claimed that they were able to get a speed of 1 Gbps or even higher in their trials. Now, there is something interesting that you know. With 4G, the maximum speed was 1 Gbps. So, in the 5G trial, we are only touching 1 or 2 Gbps. We are not going higher than that. The other thing that you must understand is, in India, there would hardly be anyone who actually has got 1 Gbps speed in his or her mobile phone. So the question is, are we really living in a 4G world right now? We are thinking of jumping to the 5G, but have we realized the true potential of even 4G? Many of you would live in metro cities. Even in the metro cities in India, even in the center of the cities, when you go and do a speed check, you might not get a speed anywhere near 1 Gbps. Your phone might say 4G, your phone might give you a sign of 4G, LTE, but the speeds that you check might still be 20 Mbps, might still be 50 Mbps at best, but it is nowhere near the claimed 4G speed of 1 Gbps. So there are a lot of people who are criticizing whether the government should hurry and roll out the 5G, or whether our focus should be just to ensure that at least the rollout of 4G is done properly before we jump onto the new technology. But the government is saying that we cannot lag behind when the entire world, when most of the developed nations are moving towards 5G. We cannot be at a position where it becomes a disadvantage to our business and to the other sectors which really require the 5G technology. Now, how have we reached to this era? We started with 1G, 2G, 3, 4, and 5G. As I said, 3G was introduced a few years back when I was in college. 4G was introduced again a few years back, and we thought that 4G will be a big game changer and we would have breakneck internet speeds and nothing would really stop us from going online. And it has happened at least in major cities. Thanks to many of the government initiatives, including BharatNet, we now have increased internet connectivity throughout the country. But the fact remains, have we gotten the speed that was promised to us by 4G? Most certainly not. 5G promises to go one step higher. One of the other things why we really need 5G, as I said earlier, is many of the state-of-the-art technologies that we are talking about these days are dependent on 5G. I gave you an example of driverless cars earlier. There is the concept of Internet of Things that we will discuss just in a bit. The Internet of Things is kind of a network where all your devices are connected to each other. That also requires 5G technology. Even the concept of telemedicines. For instance, you are in a situation where you need a surgery from a doctor who is in Europe or from a doctor who is in Australia or the US. The doctor might not be able to come here, or you might not be in a position to travel all the way to US or Australia. There are a lot of robots where the surgeon sitting in the US will operate a robot and the robot will perform the surgery on you over here. Just imagine even a lag of 1 second or a couple of seconds in that communication between the surgeon and the robot, what that would result into you and your body. That is why for those kind of technologies, we have to make sure that we ensure that there is no latency at all, and that can only happen with the introduction of the 5G technology. We have evolved from an era where we used to have mobile phones which used to be like a brick, and then we were pretty happy with the 2G phones where you used to have that snake game and we used to just play those games all day long. Then we had the 3G where YouTube really started to run. We had the 4G technology where now we don't even download anything, we just buffer it. And now we have the 5G technology, which will take us even one step further into the era of these technologies that we are talking about. Now, 5G mainly in India works on 3 bands. And I want you to understand this very carefully, because this is what will make you understand the problem and the confusion that the internet companies and the telecom companies in India are facing. 5G in India can be offered in 3 bands. There is a low band. When I say low band, I mean the low frequency band. There is a mid band and there is the high band. Now, what exactly is the difference between these? In very simple terms, low band would have higher coverage. Higher coverage means it would be able to cover more area. But the maximum speed that the low band would be able to give you is about 100 Mbps. So either you compromise on your speed or you compromise on your coverage area. You have to choose one of them. Second option that the companies have or the government has is they can go with the mid-band spectrum. Now, mid-band spectrum, as the name suggests, is kind of a compromise between low and high. It will give you a higher speed as compared to the low band, but lower coverage as compared to the coverage area. And then comes a high-speed spectrum where the coverage would be lower, but the speed will be extremely high, and that is what we require for state-of-the-art technology. Now, just take a second to think about the different applications we might have depending upon the band. Let me give you a very simple example. Let's assume the government of India wants to give internet to certain villages. These villages don't have any internet connectivity. Okay? Now, in the villages, the density of population is lower. So people are spread out. For example, in 1 square kilometer area, there may be only 20 people living, only 30 people living. So there are multiple villages that are adjoined and the density of population is not that high. For those kind of areas, what kind of frequency would be ideal? You have to cover a larger area and you don't really have to give them speed of 1 Gbps or 10 Gbps, right? I'm sure most of the people in an area where we don't have internet would be really happy even getting 100 Mbps. So obviously for low band spectrum, these are ideal for providing internet connectivity to villages where density of population is lower and the area that we are covering is higher, and where you can slightly compromise on the maximum speed that this technology is offering. And when you come to the high band spectrum, where do you have to give it? For example, there is a tech park, or for example, there is a place where a group of high-tech companies run. Let's say cities such as Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, Gurgaon. Those are the places where in a small area you would have a lot of high-tech companies running. Many of them would be researching, many of them would be experimenting, which requires state-of-the-art internet technology. So obviously for those areas, high band spectrum will be suitable for them. So this is suitable for research purposes and for urban areas mainly, where there is a lot of development and tech plays going on. So depending upon where exactly is the government or the company targeting, the company or the government can choose to use the kind of band or the kind of frequency that would suit the purpose. Now, how is it different for the company? Let's say Airtel has to roll out 5G technology in a big city and in some villages. For that, they first have to take spectrum permission from the government. Spectrum permission means Airtel will say, sir, this is the technology bracket that we are using. In this technology bracket, or in this frequency bracket, we will be sending the waves. For example, Airtel says that at 700 to 800 megahertz, we will be sending our 5G signals for villages. Please don't let anyone else send their signals in the same frequency range so that there is no interference. For this, Airtel would have to pay money to the government to buy exclusivity. That is what you call spectrum auction. Every company, telecom company that wants to use that spectrum, that wants to reserve that frequency range, would have to contact the government, would have to pay money to the government, and the government will give that telecom company the right. This is called spectrum auctioning. Remember, when the government is auctioning the spectrum, the government is not manufacturing anything. It is not that the government had to spend any money manufacturing the spectrum. Spectrum right is just an exclusive right that is given to the company, assuring them that no one else will use this frequency and you are free to use this. We had the 2G auction, we had the 3G auction, we had the 4G, and now the government is planning to hold the 5G auction also. So Airtel, if they have to roll out 5G in villages only and not in big areas, then they can ask the government, sir, only give us the low band spectrum, we are happy with this. And they would have to spend lesser money. If Airtel decides tomorrow, no, we have to give the highest speed possible to the best of metro cities, to the best of tech companies, then obviously Airtel then would have to reserve high band spectrum from the government. For high band spectrum, the government will charge more. Now, why will the government charge more? Just think about it. As I said, government did not spend any money in manufacturing the high band spectrum or low band spectrum. Then why would the government charge more for high band and lesser for low band? Very simple. Government also knows that when Airtel buys a high band spectrum, they will sell that internet or 5G technology to tech companies which are very rich, which can pay good money to Airtel. So Airtel will earn more by rolling out 5G on high band spectrum, so they can afford to pay the government more money. Simple. If Airtel is only rolling out 5G in villages, they would only have to use a low band spectrum, and for that they will not be get paid. They won't get paid a lot of money because villagers would not pay a lot of money to Airtel for that, and government of India also would take lesser money from Airtel. So higher the frequency, higher the sum the government would have, higher the sum the government will charge, and the telecom companies would have to pay that for the exclusivity of using that spectrum. If you try and remember this diagram, it will make it very easy for you to understand the relationship between frequency, coverage, and the latency part that I am talking about. For example, if internet is given or rolled out in under 1 gigahertz band, this is low band, let's say 700 megahertz, then the coverage will be the maximum. That means about one tower will be able to cover an area which is about 20 miles. But the latency would be the highest, that is about 10 milliseconds. The higher the frequency, the lower will be the latency. If you go to the high band, that is from 24 gigahertz or higher, latency would be only and only 1 millisecond. That is what the big companies, the tech companies, research organizations want. But as you can see, the coverage becomes extremely low. The coverage is less than 0.6 miles, so less than even a kilometer would be a coverage of that tower. So obviously the company would have to spend more, set up more towers, set up more infrastructure, spend more money, set up great equipment, and that will cost a lot of money. And that is why telecom business is not an easy business to actually make an entry into. You see right now, if you talk about the private sector in telecom, there are only 3 companies that exist. There is Jio, there is Airtel, and there is Vodafone Idea, V as you call it. One of the reasons why we have only so few companies who are existing in India in the telecom sector is the government charges a humongous amount of money for this spectrum. In fact, that is why in the 4G auction, the 700 megahertz spectrum was actually unsold. No company actually gave the government the money to buy the 700 megahertz one. Why? Because the company said it is too costly. We are not giving you this much money. We don't have money. Most of the telecom companies that we have in India are under a lot of economic pressure. One of the major reasons is that they have to give a lot of money to the government for that spectrum. And they also know that if their competitor is introducing 5G, they cannot be left behind. They also have to introduce 5G. If you just compare, just a few years back, we used to have a lot of other telecom companies in India. We used to have something called Docomo. There was Tata Docomo. We used to have something called Uninor. We used to have something called Aircel. And there were many other, there was even Videocon that had started its telecom services. All these came up thinking that telecom can be a sector where you can actually invest little money and earn a lot of money. But with this spectrum auctioning, the spectrum being so costly, the 3G, 4G spectrums, most of these have wrapped up their businesses, and we have only 3 companies remaining in India. And of that also, you know the status of Vodafone Idea, which is under extreme debt, and now they had to give a huge part of their equity to the government. So it is on the part of the government, because they are charging so much money for the spectrum, the telecom companies now don't have enough money. As I had discussed earlier, there are multiple applications of 5G that you see. Some of the applications, as I said, are driverless cars. There is the drone technology that will come up. If you are interested in technology, there is a buzzword that goes on these days, that is metaverse, where you can put on your augmented reality glasses and you can imagine yourself going to some other places, meeting new people. All that requires 5G. Only and only then that would be an experience that you would like. 5G also is making the mobile computing much easier. Industrial automation, mainly the industries which require a lot of precision, which can't even afford to have even a small defection, all of these require 5G to work extremely well. And only then they would be able to make sure that the technology actually translates into real life. There is also something called the Internet of Things. Interestingly, we are discussing it today, but about a few years back, there was a question on Internet of Things in the prelims examination. Now, what exactly is Internet of Things? Let me explain to you with a simple example. Let's imagine tomorrow morning I have a class at 8 a.m. Now, for an 8 a.m. class, I have to get up, let's assume at 6 or 6:30 a.m. I have to get up, take a shower, have my breakfast, sit in my car, and then drive and come to the studio and then take the class. And all these things would happen or would have to happen so that I reach for the class before 8 a.m. So before sleeping, I just put an alarm at 6 a.m. and I will do nothing else, just a 6 a.m. alarm. Now my alarm or my phone, wherever I put an alarm, will automatically communicate to my geyser that an alarm has been put at 6 a.m. So geyser should automatically switch on at 5:45 a.m. It should automatically communicate to, let's say I have a cooking machine or I have a toaster which will toast the bread. Automatically the toaster should toast the bread at, let's say, 6:30 a.m. Automatically my car, which would have GPS, automatically my car's GPS would set the location of my office. The car would drive automatically to the office. Just in case I'm stuck in the traffic, just in case there is a lot of traffic and I'm not being able to reach on time, then my car should automatically send the message. My car should automatically test other people who are waiting for me or anyone who is waiting for me at office, saying that this person is running late. All that would happen if I just set an alarm for 6 a.m. I will do nothing else. It is just that my devices will communicate with each other, that the alarm has been set for this time, then he will get up, he'll take a shower, he will go to the kitchen, and he'll have this and that, etc. And even my devices such as car will be able to communicate. They would save number of my colleagues in the office and they would be able to tell if I'm running on time or not. This is what you call Internet of Things, in simple terms, IoT. Now this sounds good and it may sound scary also. What if the car does not really stop at your office and it just goes on and takes you somewhere else? But this is the idea of the future. This is what is Internet of Things. For that to happen, we require a connection where the latency is minimal, where the frequency of signals is so high that it does not get disrupted or there is no interference with any other signal, any howsoever. So the future of Internet of Things and similar kind of technologies would depend on whether or not we are able to roll out 5G in a successful manner, like the way that we want or not. Now, what exactly has the Indian government been doing about it? Indian government has been thinking about 5G for a long time now. One of the first initiatives that we did was that in 2018, we had the National Digital Communication Policy. This policy, it was an updated version of an old policy. This policy said that India has to be prepared to enter the era of modern technological advancement in telecom sectors such as 5G and IoT. Again, IoT is Internet of Things that I just talked about. After that, in 2020, there was a high-level forum by the name of 5G called 5G-India Forum, in which 3 ministries were chosen and the secretaries of those ministries, that is Ministry of Telecom, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, and Department of Science and Technology. Along with them, some experts were chosen, and they were told that now you have to draw a roadmap to ensure that in the coming years, India is well versed with the 5G technology, and we are in the position of leadership when you compare us with the other countries around the world. For example, the aim that was set was that the manufacturing ecosystem of India should have 50% of India's market. So over half of whatever we require for 5G should be made in India, and even 10% of the global market should be captured in the next 5 to 7 years. Over here, let me add one more thing. Ever since we had started to talk about 5G, there is a China factor that actually always comes across with 5G. Why is that? See, for testing 5G or for rolling out 5G, you cannot do this on the devices that we have already. Even right now, if you go on Amazon and Flipkart to buy a new mobile phone, you will see that some companies have rolled out their 5G versions also, which are slightly more expensive as compared to the 4G versions. Similarly, for telecom companies also, they would have to update their equipment, they would have to update their towers, and they'll have to ensure that their connectivity is state of the art. For all that to happen, they require a lot of new devices, a lot of new technology. Now, which country is it which is manufacturing these devices at the most affordable price? No price for guessing, that is China. A lot of Chinese companies right now have developed a kind of monopoly in developing telecommunication equipments which are used for 5G testing and 5G rollout. For example, one of them is Huawei. Now, in India, you might not have heard about Huawei a lot because earlier Huawei used to make mobile phones also that used to come to India. They used to make dongles also when we had the 3G technology. They were also used in India. But of late, Huawei in India specifically is focusing more on making commercial equipments rather than making personal equipment. So you might not have anything made of Huawei at your house, but your internet service provider would surely have something that Huawei has made. Around the world, if you see, Huawei is an extremely big name. It is one of the leading companies around the world. In US, for example, it is the second or the third biggest telecom equipment provider. Now, with many other companies of China, this company also is in the middle of a controversy. There are allegations that this company, Huawei, because it is providing equipments which is transferring signals and frequency, it actually is storing information of people of US, India, etc. and transmitting it to none other than China. When these allegations first came out in US a few years back, there were a lot of debate and heated discussion between China and the US, resulting in the US banning Huawei to sell any of their equipments in the US. In India also, India has been extremely careful in choosing which company should supply the equipment for 5G testing in India, because government also is very interested in testing 5G in India as soon as possible. When the India-China issue started to take place in 2020, India also tried to reduce the import of Chinese telecommunication equipment, especially because of allegations of our information being stolen. In fact, before that, Huawei was also front runner in supplying those equipments in India for 5G testing, but now that has come down. In fact, Jio had announced that Jio's entire 5G testing would be on indigenous equipments, means Jio has been testing 5G on those equipments which they have made in India, which they have made themselves. So this is also something that the companies are very wary of, not just companies, the Indian government also. Just 4 days back, our IT minister was giving an interview and he was being asked about what exactly is the status of 5G rollout in India, and he said it will be rolled out this year itself. There was a question asked to him, are you now in a mood to allow Chinese companies also to come and take part in this 5G testing? He did not say yes, he did not say no. His reply was, any company that fulfills the requirements and fulfills the rules that the government has made would be allowed to come. Simple. He did not say Chinese companies are allowed or not allowed. He kept that window open. But at the end of the day, it would be on the discretion of the government and the company that is actually rolling it out. Another initiative or a shot in the arm that the Indian government got was something called D10. So a few months back, there was a G7 summit in which UK proposed that we should make a group of 10 countries called the D10. Which are these 10 countries? They said that we should have G7 and 3 other countries who are working in the field of 5G. Who are these 3? That is South Korea, Australia and India, making it these 10 countries together. UK said that these countries should work together to ensure that our dependence on Chinese equipments reduces. Again, why? Because of this Huawei issue and because these allegations against China are true not just in US but in UK and other countries as well. So everyone is wary about the role of China. Now let me tell you an interesting story about China, about 5G specifically. Indian finance minister said that in the budget speech that we will be rolling out the 5G technology in 2020. Do you know one other very small country in India's neighborhood is actually testing 5G very soon? If I ask you to guess, you might not be able to do it, but that is Nepal. Now, Nepal is not a country which you would think would have the best of technology, and not downsizing anyone, but the kind of resources that are required by the government to roll out 5G or to test it, only a few developed countries are ready to spend that much money. So how is it that Nepal is saying that we will be testing it? The answer comes from here, China. It is China that is helping Nepal in testing the 5G, in helping roll out 5G. All the equipments and every requirement that Nepal has for 5G testing is being given to them by China, which again is a concern that India shares. India right now is not in a position to tell Nepal that we will sponsor all that study, all that equipment. That is why China is now filling that void, which is a concern for India. As you can see here, in budget 2022, while our finance minister said that 5G services rollout will happen in this year, there is this interview, as I said, of IT minister just 4 days back where he said that 5G auction will conclude by August. But at the same time, we have this news from Nepal also, which is the news of before our budget, where Nepal says that telecom trial for the 5G technology will begin, especially with the blessings of China. So that is a concern that India has to look into. Now, what exactly are the challenges that we are facing for the 5G rollout? Again, if it would have been so easy, we would have done it long time back. So there has to be something that is stopping us. The first challenge is, of course, the infrastructure. As I've been repeating, not just you, not just the end user would have to upgrade your mobile phones to use that 5G technology. Even the telecom partners, even the telecom companies would have to upgrade most of their towers, most of their equipments. Most of the telecom towers that you see in India are actually connected online. They don't have fiber connectivity. So the current status right now is lump sum 30%. So basically about 30% of India's telecom towers have fiber connectivity. For 5G to actually become a reality, this number has to go up and reach at least 60 to 70%. So at least 60 to 70% of our telecom towers have to have fiber connectivity. And it is again much easier to say. It's not that someone will go with a fiber on the shoulder and then just connect it with a sellotape. It's not like they come and give us internet connection at home. Doing this will require a lot of investment, will require a lot of infrastructure to be moved from one place to other, and it will be a great challenge for these companies. Second, as I said, the equipment that is needed to roll out 5G, even to test 5G, for that most of the world is dependent on China. Now obviously it's not something that Indian companies can't do. Jio is doing it, they are making it in an Indian setting, but to make it at the same cost that China was able to do might be a challenge. So if we really have to go through and follow our commitment of Make in India or Atmanirbhar Bharat, that also is going to be a challenge, especially with 5G. And that is why we have to first see whether or not we actually have those equipments ready with us or not. Single biggest challenge for 5G rollout, however, this first prize goes to the high spectrum prices. Now, as I said earlier, it is a very interesting conundrum that we have to understand. Why is it that the government charges so much money for the spectrum? It is not that they are making it, they are not inventing it, it is just a right to use it exclusively. Assume it like I have 24 hours in a day, and you want the right to talk to me for 1 hour, and you want that no one else should call me, you should be able to talk to me for 1 hour continuously. and I say that there will be an auctioning for that. You say I will give 10,000 rupees, someone else says I will give 20,000 rupees, 50,000 rupees, depending upon how much you want to talk to me. Now, in that case, is it fair for me to charge so much money? I'm not inventing the time, right? It is what it is. I'm just giving you an exclusive right. That is what the government is doing. But government is charging an extremely high price for the spectrum. Now, I'll tell you both sides of the story. Let's start from the telecom side. If Airtel, for example, has to pay, I'm taking a random sum. If Airtel has to pay 50,000 crore rupees to the government, let's assume, to start 5G operation. Now, it can be higher than that also. From where will Airtel earn its money? Obviously, they are not in the philanthropy business. If they are spending that 50,000 crore, they would want to earn 1 lakh crore out of it. From where would they charge the money? Obviously, they would charge it from you. They would charge it from me. What other source of revenue would they have? So even if we do have 5G in India, almost everyone agrees that it will be at a very steep price. Don't expect that the 5G will be given to you at the same price that 4G or 3G was given. Because the companies, if they have to earn profit, they have to extract more money from the people. So ultimately, if government charges more, the company will charge the customers more. That means you and me will have to pay more. It's a very simple thing. Let's see what is happening with 4G. In fact, just today I did a phone recharge for myself. I remember the same recharge I used to do about 7-8 months back for Jio number. It used to cost me 199 rupees. And then I remember about 3-4 months back, it started costing me about, I think, 249 rupees. And today when I charge with the same plan, it is charging me 299 rupees. And because there are only few companies that we have, there is Jio, Airtel and Idea, Vodafone, almost everyone is charging the same sum. You can't say, okay, I'll change my telecom provider to someone else. But they have to charge higher because they are in so much debt. Debt to who? Debt to the government only. That is a very interesting part. It is the government to whom they owe money, and then they're taking money from the people. So high spectrum prices are very, very, very big challenge. I'll give you an example. In India, the average cost of spectrum is about 492 crore per megahertz. If you actually see the megahertz frequency that the government is saying, for example, Airtel is told by the government that this 100 megahertz is yours. No other company will use this. So for these 100 megahertz, Airtel would have to pay starting price 492 crore into 100. This is as a starting price. Now imagine in an auction how high can it go. This is almost 7 times higher as compared to the UK and many other. And I'll show you an example with a comparison table also. Apart from that, there is also a challenge of using the best form of 5G technology. Now, what do I mean by the best form of 5G technology? The standards for 5G, that is which frequency band to use, how to provide 5G, are set up by an international organization, ITU, International Telecommunication Unit. Now, ITU is the one that will ITU is the one that will decide which standards to set, and usually they are followed by countries throughout the world. However, in different countries, there might be certain challenges. I'll give you an example. So the government of India thought that for 5G, we will give to the companies spectrum from 3300 megahertz to 3600 megahertz. This is what the government said, that this is a good high-speed frequency. Every company would be happy. We will divide it, maybe let's say 100 to Airtel, 100 to Vodafone, 100 to Jio, but this is what we'll do. Then all of a sudden, ISRO called the government. ISRO said, no, don't do this, because we also have satellites. Our satellite technology also is based on communication. We can't interfere with their signal, and we also want this frequency. So ISRO said, out of this, give us about 50 megahertz in between. Okay, rest you can divide. Then the Defense Ministry also said, no, we also want this frequency. Why? Because we also have to communicate. We also use our walkie-talkies. We also can't afford to be interfered with someone else. It is a matter of national security. So they said, we also want 25 megahertz in this frequency range only. So now what is happening is the available frequency with the government to give to the telecom companies in India is not very high. because we have used it and given some to ISRO, given some to defense, etc. The other problem that we are having is, in India or anywhere around the world, the speed that you get, the internet connectivity that you get depends upon how many users are there. Think of it like there is a specific amount of signals that a tower or an antenna will throw at you. If there are lakhs of people under the tower, under the antenna, everyone will get few signals, simple. If there are very few people, they will get more signals. So in India, because internet users are also very high, we might have a problem of not everyone being able to enjoy the great speed that the 5G promises. There are differences in 5G band. As I said, in India, 5G band, there are 3 different 5G bands that the government is planning to offer: low, mid, high. It remains to be seen whether or not the companies are interested in the high band or the low band or not. So that also is a challenge that we have to see, whether or not the telecom companies are ready to buy in the auction all the different types of bands. And then there are many misconceptions about 5G. Some of them we will discuss in just a bit. When you have misconception, I am sure many of you would have followed the case of Juhi Chawla. A few months back in 2011 only, Juhi Chawla filed a case in Delhi High Court, a PIL, saying that rollout of 5G should be stopped, it will harm the environment. Now, I will not go into the reasons, but what happened, as you know, was at that time the courts were hearing the matter online. Before the matter was heard, there was a Zoom link apparently she was given. She posted that Zoom link on Instagram, Facebook, inviting many people to attend that hearing. And in that hearing, it's not supposed to happen like that. In that hearing, many people who had joined in started playing songs, etc. And the judges got very angry and they imposed a fine of 20 lakh rupees on Juhi Chawla, which was recently reduced to 2 lakh now. But the court said that no, we don't find any scientific evidence that there are environmental implications of 5G. So we are taking this away. The PIL was not really heard by the court seriously. Some other problems that we have is, number one, the problem of coverage. When we talk about the 4G, 5G spectrum, there is a very interesting issue of the 700 megahertz band. As I said, when the 4G auction was happening, 700 megahertz band was auctioned, government was trying to auction it in 4G. But no company actually made a bid on it. No company bought it, which was very surprising. Why? Because around the world, in Europe, etc., 700 megahertz band is supposed to be the ideal band. It has good speed also and it has good coverage also. In fact, it is said that at this frequency range, one tower can cover about 140 square kilometers, which is pretty high, and with decent speed. But still, no telecom company in India actually made a bid on this 700 megahertz frequency range. Why? Because it was too costly. It was too costly. This was an ideal band because it has high coverage. This band was ideal to provide internet connectivity in the rural areas also, because it has higher coverage, it might not have the best of speed, but because the companies did not buy it, now the government is saying in the 5G auction, we will try to sell this also. But government has to understand, if they don't lower the prices, either the companies might not bid for it, or even if they do bid, they will have to extract more money from the people, from the end consumer like you and me. The other problem again is distant digital inclusion. Again, see, the reality is, how much speed do we get right now? We are living in the 4G model. We are living at a time when there is 4G technology available. Our mobile phones are sold to us saying that this is 4G. There is a small 4G sign that we have at the top. But the speeds that we get are nowhere near what were promised to me. The reason why that happened is, number one, we did not build the kind of infrastructure that was required for 4G. It required a lot of investment. It required upgradation of the antennas. It required upgradation of the telephone towers, required upgradation for the equipment, but it did not happen. Part of the reason was because it was very costly. And the companies had already given so much money to the government in auctioning that they were not left with any money. The government said, okay, whatever money that you owe us for the auction, pay it in installments, 10 to 16 years. But even then, even if you pay it in installment for 10 to 16 years, it is such a high sum. It led to almost the bankruptcy of Vodafone. It all started with the auctioning and with the spectrum prices being so high. Thus, the government must ensure that at the end of the day, ensuring that broadband reaches every part of the country is not just the responsibility of the telecom companies. It is the responsibility of the government also. So ideally, we have to go with a PPP model, that is public-private partnership. Expecting that the telecom companies only will spend all that humongous amount of money to ensure that broadband connectivity happens across the country is not fair on those companies. We have to ensure that the government also spends its part of the money. If not, then subsidize it. Make sure that at least they don't have to spend so much money in the auction. And that is why a PPP model such as the one that we had with BharatNet can be a good way forward. BharatNet was started by the UPA government, then it was carried out by the current government, and the government has increased the target by saying that now we will cover every village in India with high net connectivity. But again, for that to happen, it requires a lot of investment, it requires a lot of infrastructure building, and both the private and the public sector has to come together. Think of it from the telecom point of view. If I have a telecom company, why would I set up a tower which will cost me crores of rupees in a village? I know that people in the villages will not pay a lot of money for the phone recharge, so how will I get my money back? It is the government's responsibility to subsidize it, and that will happen with the 5G. The government here also has to decide what is the problem statement. Do they want to give the fastest internet connection to a few people only? That is, give 5G technology, give 20, 30, even 100 Gbps to a few people and decide that yes, we have entered the 5G stage. Or are we in a problem that we have to ensure universal access connectivity across the country? These are two different things. Would we be happy if everyone in India got, let's say, 100 Mbps connection? Is that our aim? Or is our aim that top 1% people in India should get 100 Gbps and remaining people we are not really caring about that? Is that the aim? Because if the aim is the second one, then the government cannot let just the telecom companies take up all the responsibility of spreading internet connection, of building all the infrastructure. Government has to reduce the spectrum rate, government has to make a PPP model, government has to make sure that even the low frequency band such as the 700 megahertz, even when it was not bought by the companies, the government should have discounted it. What is the government side of the view? Why is it the government cannot reduce the rate? At the end of the day, the government also needs money. In India, where the tax base is extremely low, the government does not have a lot of avenues to earn. At a time when the government is spending a lot on the welfare schemes, when the government is spending a lot on the coronavirus pandemic, the government needs money, and the auction comes at that time where the government cannot really bring down the prices. As we discussed earlier, the spectrum prices in India are one of the, or in fact, the highest in the world. As you can see in the table, if in India, per megahertz, if the average cost is 492 crore, in Austria it is just 7. Italy, which comes second, is not even half of India. Even Italy is almost 1/3 of India. So obviously, as you can see in India, telecom companies would have to pay a lot more money to get their hands on the 5G spectrum as compared to anywhere else throughout the world, which is again in the hands of the government. There is also a debate about the millimeter wave. The simple and short debate is that till now we have been getting our internet through fiber connectivity. There is a person who comes at your house, he draws a wire, and then you get the router switch on and you are online. Of late, there are some companies who are now bringing internet of a new kind, that is satellite-based internet. It started with Elon Musk and his organization. He said that through Starlink, we will send satellites to space, we will not need any wires, etc. Through that satellite connection, you can go online. Now for that satellite connection, it is a thing of the future, it might take a few years. Those satellites also need certain frequency to work. Now the problem is these satellite companies have an organization. This is called Satellite Industry Authority, SIA. It is a US organization. Its Indian arm said to the government that, see, when you are auctioning the 5G frequency, please don't auction the wave. Wave is millimeter wave. That is somewhere between 24 gigahertz and 100 gigahertz. The satellite company said, please don't auction that. Why? Because it has to be reserved for satellite. When we bring our satellite after a few years, we will use that wave. It is a thing of the future, but if you give these frequencies to 5G companies right now, we will not be able to use them. That is what the satellite organizations are saying. They are saying that the 5G auction should only be in this range, 27.5 to 31 gigahertz maybe, and 17.7 to 21.2. Everything else, please leave it. Because in everything else, we will have satellite-based communication. Now, this problem is that the satellite companies have to understand that they are not a reality right now. The satellite internet or the satellite-based internet connection will only happen in the future. Airtel is thinking about it, Elon Musk, his company is also thinking about it, but for that to now deny the 5G companies or telecom companies their right to use 5G spectrum will be unfair on them. There is also an argument that the existing satellites in India, that is weather prediction satellites, they work on the frequency range of 23.6 to 24 gigahertz. This is their frequency range. So if the government auctions 24 gigahertz or higher, there might be a chance of interference. What if the signal gets distorted? What if the satellite signal of 24 gigahertz gets distorted and starts operating on 24.1 gigahertz? Then it will start to interfere with the 5G signals. So there should be at least some margin in between. Because the existing satellites, the ones that predict weather patterns, they must also be given certain margin. If you give the same frequency or if you give frequency very nearby to 5G signals, again there will be interference and the entire idea of high speed, low latency will be lost. Because the high speed, low latency signals require almost zero or no interference at all with any other signal. That is why there is a long debate on wave, whether or not the government will auction it in the 5G spectrum or not. It remains to be seen what standards the government take. Government right now, as you expect, is taking a very diplomatic step, saying that we will balance out the rights of the satellite companies and the rights of the telecom companies. We will make sure that none of them are compromised. But it remains to be seen when the auctions actually happen in reality. There are other fears about 5G also. One fear that we keep on hearing is about radiation. In fact, for many years, there have been a lot of news reports about whether or not the telecom towers or cell towers also emit negative radiation in the environment. Now, there are two ways to look at it. You can't ignore the fact that there are radiation that come in from towers and that come in from equipments like these. But are they really harmful for the human body or not? That is what you have to decide. Now, the best source to get this kind of information is WHO. WHO's International Agency for Research on Cancer has said that the radio frequency waves, which are these frequencies, can possibly be carcinogenic. Carcinogenic means something that causes cancer. So these can be cancer causing. Probably is the key word. But there has to be much more research done on them. The radiations are at very high level. If they are at very high level and there is constant exposure to the human body, they can be harmful. But they said that WHO website says research on 5G is still ongoing and we'll have to see how it works. In fact, that is why even if when you go to doctors, the doctors will tell you, don't go for a CT scan or X-ray when it is not required, because at the end of the day, those are very high frequency waves, which your body should not be accustomed or should not be very nearby in very frequent terms. Your body should not be exposed to them, and only when the doctor asks you to get those tests done, only then you should get those tests done. So there are both views, but still there is no scientific study right now that says that there is a negative impact on health or environment due to 5G. There are some studies going on, but one of the reasons why we have not done this or we have not arrived at a conclusion is, number one, the 5G rollout is still in the initial stages. Very few countries have 5G, and also it has not been a long time since 5G has been rolled out. A few countries rolled it out in 2020, few in 2021, and now more will happen. So maybe in the coming years we'll get to know whether or not the 5G actually has a negative impact. The other interesting part that you might have heard is that 5G is actually leading to cancellation of flights in US. It was covered in a lot of newspapers. Now, why is it that it is happening only in US and no other country? That has to do with something that the US is using. That is the frequency range that the US is using for 5G. That is the problem. In US, the two main telecom companies that are rolling out 5G are AT&T and Verizon. They have been given the band of 3.7 gigahertz or 3700 megahertz to 3980 megahertz. Now, the problem is that the aircrafts use an equipment called the altimeter. Altimeter, as you know, is an equipment which tells the plane the altitude, that is the distance between the plane and the ground. That is very useful when there are bad weather conditions, the visibility is low. It is extremely helpful when the plane is landing. Now, the telecom companies are saying that the frequency range of the altimeter is 4200 to 4400 megahertz, very near to the 5G wave, and there are chances of interference. It has not happened till now, but there are good chances of interference. And that is why a lot of flights in US got cancelled some weeks back when the 5G was rolled out nearby the airports. What has happened as a result is the airports and nearby zones are now called 5G free zones in the US. 5G signals will not be transmitted nearby the airplanes, and that is how they are trying to resolve that issue. Is this the same case in India? No. At that time, our waves that we are planning to offer to the companies in the auction is not this band. The waves that India is planning to offer is 3300 to 3670 megahertz. So there is a good gap between those and the ones that is used by the altimeter. European countries also have not got this issue, like France, etc., rolled out 5G without any of this issue. The one thing that the US can do is maybe reduce their frequency range that they have allotted to 5G, or maybe get another equipment made which works at a different frequency range. The other thing that can be done is, many European countries have decided that when the flight is landing on the airport, the last 90-100 seconds should be free of 5G signals. For example, in Europe, many countries like France have decided that the last 90 seconds of the flight, that is when the flight is just about 1.5 minutes away from the airport, about to land, it should be a 5G free zone, there should be a buffer zone, and there should not be any interference from the 5G signals. Similarly, in the US, right now, the buffer zone that they have decided is only 20 seconds. US is saying that 20 seconds is enough, but they have to ensure that it is longer than that to ensure that at the time of landing, the flight is safe. The other thing that they have to do is that in the US, the transmitters, that is the altimeters, transmit energy at a very high frequency, so maybe they can lower that, and all that can resolve the problem that the US is facing right now. As you can see, this was covered widely across the world, that is the airplanes or airlines cancelling their flights. Many flights flying from India to US also got cancelled. In the end, one funny story that came out, see, when the world is going through a bad time, in the bad time it's very easy to believe anything which does not really seem to be true. Lies spread extremely fast. In Britain specifically, and in many other countries of Europe, when the coronavirus started, there were some rumors that started going on that introduction of 5G has to do something with coronavirus. No one was ready to believe that coronavirus can be because of a virus and we are not able to treat it. Many people in UK, in fact, thought that it is because of the 5G radiation, because 5G was being rolled out at that time, that people are getting coronavirus. As a result of which, thousands of people came out on the streets, starting burning the 5G towers, the ones that cost crores and crores of rupees. And there were a lot of studies and there were a lot of appeals that were made by the politicians to pacify the people to ensure that no more 5G towers are burnt. So as you can see, not just in India, but even in the most developed nations, misinformation can spread extremely fast. Thankfully, we are past that stage for the 5G now. This is it for the 5G technology. I hope the session was useful to you. We discussed each and every aspect of the 5G technology that will be relevant for the examination point of view. Thank you so much for watching the video. Good night.